Hello, and welcome to another episode of Technology and the Arts. My name is Brian Kelley,
And I'm John LeMasney.
and together we are going to explore the connections between technology and art. And tonight we'll be focusing on art as community service, how libraries, co-teaching, and co-working opportunities, and public events such as the massively popular Art All Night here in Trenton, New Jersey, uses art and technology to bring communities together. But before we get to that, John, it's good to see you again. How you doing?
Doing great, Brian. Thanks for asking. So I wanted to talk about some of the things that were going on right now. Tomorrow, in fact, I'm co-presenting and making on the idea of making an open technologies in libraries tomorrow in Cherry Hill for an organization called NJLA, the New Jersey Library Association. Currently, I'm working with libraries, businesses, and schools in the area to migrate from other messaging solutions such as Microsoft and related solutions to Google Apps for work and education. I continue to work with great clients like Sustainable Princeton, Sustainable Lawrence, and Griggstown Farm, all in the central Jersey area, to integrate technology into the work that they do. And I've been working to move clients from other solutions to WordPress, or moving them from their existing WordPress installations, which have been overwrought with too many plugins and too much complexity, to simpler solutions. Also, I wanted to do a shout out to Known. Known is an indie web production, and it's a lot like WordPress, except that it is a lot simpler. And it's also open source in the sense that you can go and get the code and download it, but it's also like WordPress in that you have a built-in publishing option that they host. The company is Known, but the website is withknown.com, WITHKNOWN.com. And what they're trying to do is essentially to recreate Tumblr. They're making a Tumblr that is open source, that you can install on your own server, and I think that they might have something. I think they really might have something, because as opposed to Tumblr, which is the reason that the reason I don't push people towards Tumblr as a simple publishing solution is because if they go with Tumblr, it means that their content is not theirs. It belongs to Tumblr. And while they might be able to get an export that is a limited format of their content, it's not in any structured format. It's not as though as with WordPress, you can export your entire site and get the entire site and install it on another system that is not WordPress. Tumblr's not like that. And
Right.
so Known is trying to simplify, trying to unclunkify WordPress. And I say that very delicately, because I don't think that WordPress is clunky if you are a larger organization. I think that WordPress is probably too much if you are just a simple individual who wants to put some stuff up that they found out on the web. That's really what Tumblr is for. The problem I have with Tumblr is that it's not open source, and I really have no control over that content. And so the way that I've been doing Tumblr is by publishing to WordPress, which then gets reposted to Tumblr. But that's essentially cross-posting. I really am excited about the possibilities with Known, and it remains to be seen whether or not it will be the right tool for me, but certainly as a secondary tool, I think it's perfect. So how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Um, Yesterday, I participated in and completed the Atlantic City International Triathlon, which I had been saying it was a 1 mile swim followed by a 20-mile bike ride. And now, usually an international triathlon is the last event is a 10K run. However, there was sort of a last-minute decision. I guess it was maybe a week or two before the race. It was in the athlete's guide, but I didn't really catch it until the night before the pre-race meeting when they announced it. They actually shortened the 10K which is 6.2 miles, to a 5-mile run. So it wasn't the full 10K, but it was still, I mean, 5 miles is still a decent, run after a mile swim and a 20-mile bike ride.
More
But
than I could possibly do.
so I finished basically around what I thought I would do. I mean, I figured I was going to be around 3 hours, and my total time was 3:04, 33.9. So 3 hours, 4 minutes, 33 seconds, 33.9 seconds. The swim was, I mean, I knew the swim was going to be, the most challenging part. The bike ride actually wound up being challenging because, in that part of the Atlantic City Expressway, which we were riding on for the most part, most people think of it as an east-west freeway or highway, but in that part where it's going away from Atlantic City, it's kind of going northwest, southeast, and the winds were like 17 miles an hour out of the north yesterday, so it was gusting pretty good as you were riding away from Atlantic City, and then we had to loop back, and when we had the wind at our back, it was fine, but then once we got to Atlantic City, we had to loop back and ride all the way back to where we turned originally, so the bike ride was a little challenging, but that was 108. My split for the bike was 108.52, and that's pretty much, what I usually ride. So the mile swim took me almost an hour. It took me 52 minutes and 16 seconds.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. But it was kind of funny because, the first quarter mile, I did pretty well, and then there was a turn, and then you had to go this long straightaway to the next turn buoy. So that was like most of the race was this back straightaway. That was probably a half mile right there, and I thought in my head it was taking me a pretty long time, and when I got to the turn buoy, I realized why. It was because the current. I was going against the current, and it was actually pretty strong, and I didn't notice it until I was getting closer to the turn buoy, and I got to maybe like 50 feet away from it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go all out, then recover a little bit, and head back for the final quarter mile. And so I'm swimming as hard as I can, and it took me about 5 minutes to cover that 50 feet. Like, I just couldn't get any closer. This thing, I'd be coming up to sight after like swimming for like 30 seconds or whatever, and it just seemed like this buoy was not getting closer. Finally, I get around it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to hang out here for a little bit and then try to finish strong. And there's a race staffer in a boat. When you run these races, usually they're like, all right, good job, not too far to go or something like that. They're always shouting encouragement. This guy in the boat has to be the honest one. He's like, you still got a long way to go, buddy. And I'm like, thanks. I'm like, I'm going to hop in the boat then. So I finished the swim and do the bike and get the run in. So 3 hours. I finished down. I mean, this is like an elite. There's a lot of elite athletes, a lot of groups. There's a lot of college groups. I mean, there were some professional like relay teams, and so I mean, this was like a high-end event for me. So I knew I wasn't gonna be anywhere in the top half or whatever. It wasn't like Heightstown where I was like the third best newcomer among male finishers. I knew I wasn't gonna get anywhere near there. So, but I figured 3 hours, and that's where I finished. So I was happy with that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Why do you do this?
It was something I just always wanted to do a triathlon. I've always been intrigued with triathlons, but I just I never had the discipline, and I had the time. I was freelancing mostly, and until recently. So I had the time to train. I had the time to go to Mercer County, Community College and train in the pool there in the early part of the year, and then that went away due to various bouts of colds and heavy workloads. Um, so I just figured, this year is going to be it, and I knew we were going to try to have another kid next year, so I figured this was my year. Graham was a little bit older, where it was a little more manageable, and just decided to do all these events this year. So that's why I did the Broad Street Run. That's why I signed up for the half marathon, the Trenton Half Marathon in November, which is my next big event. Although there's a minor one I just want to talk about briefly before I talk about it in depth later for another reason. But and so I had only signed up for the Atlantic City International Triathlon, but then I decided to do the Heightstown one as kind of like a warm-up and to get me. Because if I had gone into Atlantic City, if I had gone yesterday without doing the Heightstown Triathlon, I probably would have freaked out. I probably would have never finished the swim. I probably would have dropped out because, at least I knew what I was getting into. So I'm glad I did that. People were telling me you should do a sprint first. You should do a sprint first, and I'm like, well, I don't. And then, I came across the Heightstown one, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I'm glad I did that because yesterday would have been a disaster. But so anyway, before the Trenton Half Marathon in November, I'm doing a 5K tune-up run in early October. That's sort of connected to what we're going to be talking about later. It's the WXPN the WXPN Musicians on Call Benefit 5K at Penn Park, just outside the XPN Studios and World Cafe Live, and that's on October 5th. And briefly, because I'm going to be talking about it a little bit later, Musicians on Call is a program. It's actually, I think, run out of New York, but XPN has a partnership with the main office in New York. It's a program that brings local musicians to hospitals throughout the Delaware Valley to provide live and recorded music to the bedsides of thousands of patients each year. So you can go to xpn.org for more information about the 5K and Musicians on Call, which, again, I'll talk about more later. So, but unless there's anything else, I guess it's time to dive into our main topic for this episode, and that's technology and art as part of community service programs. I look at how it brings communities together in a variety of ways. John and I are big fans of Art All Night in Trenton, which takes place every June, right?
That's right, June.
And so that's one of the many things we're going to discuss. But John, I mean, you're kind of in the trenches in this because you do your public speaking and you work with libraries and other groups. So why don't you start us out here?
So the prospect of talking about art, technology and art as community service, I thought that we ought to flip it just a little bit. I really think that we should be thinking about community service as art with technology, and sort of thinking about the way that technology can enable community service, and it can be artistic in its nature. In other words, the ways in which a community or culture could use technology in order to come together, and we may be able to expand on that. But Princeton Public Library comes immediately to mind. When we were discussing this, that's really my model for this. I think that it's a haven, a sort of glorious space that makes use of technology and art in order to create a community. And for example, they have rotating art shows, of which I was a part at one point, through the Princeton Arts Council, I believe. And they also have co-working and collaboration spaces that I use almost every week. If I have a meeting with somebody and they are familiar with Princeton in any way, the first thing that I will suggest is that we meet in Princeton Public Library, because more often than not, they will have a space available where we can go and do that work. as opposed to them coming to my space here in Plainsboro, which is not Princeton, and can add an additional complication to somebody who wants to work with me. I can very easily go to Princeton Public Library, get a space, it has strong Wi-Fi, I can sit down there with my laptop and basically do anything that I could do here. So that library provides a space and an environment and a culture in which I feel like I can get work done with other people. The other thing is the technology training opportunities that are available for students. Is your eye okay?
It's okay.
So there are these technology training opportunities, and people come for free, and they learn about Evernote, and they learn about Arduino, and they learn about Raspberry Pi, and they learn about Inkscape, and they learn about Google Apps, and they learn about browsers, and
they learn what's better, iOS or Android.
Yeah, a long time ago. I don't think that I would participate in that again. But there are lots of opportunities for people in that community to broaden their horizons in terms of technology. And for me, as a technology consultant, it's a grand opportunity because I get to meet with people who have a need, who have an interest in what it is that I'm talking about. And more often than not, it ends up with a relationship, a client relationship or a colleague relationship where I am seen as somebody who can reach out to that person or that they can reach out to me, and we can have an exchange about how to get work done using technology. And there's a lot of art in that. The other thing I wanted to mention was if we were to use WordPress with an extension called BuddyPress, we'd be able to build a social networking community that would rival Facebook, except that it would be about some particular topic as opposed to about nothing in general, right? If we think about Seinfeld being a show about nothing, Facebook is a social network about nothing, right? It's about nothing and everything. And you could take a portion of that out of Facebook and lay it in WordPress with BuddyPress and have a beautiful, protected social network in which you could have an exchange with people and build upon that community using this platform. Another example is in universities. We have learning management systems. In Ryder, at the time that you and I were there, we had Blackboard, and now they've gone to Canvas, as have many other schools. And there are open source solutions for learning management systems like Mural. And the idea is that within the construct of an academic environment, you might want to have an electronic equivalent to that social environment where you can have quizzes and you can have exchange and you can have discussions and you can have the ability to present to one another in the same way that you and I are presenting to each other now and presenting to the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of having to cobble all that together into a solution of our own, we can rely on learning management systems in order to do that. I recently, in my own work, have been working with Griggstown Farm in order to develop and improve their Thanksgiving ordering system. And while that's not the same as the other things that we've been talking about, it certainly enables for people to come together and to make purchases that are related to community gathering. And even that, in fact, is technology related to art, if we think about the culinary arts. And finally, I wanted to talk about Reddit and their famous AMA program, their AMA feature, which is Ask Me Anything. And they have celebrities come in and meet with people who love those celebrities and have an opportunity for exchange. And in the same way as everything else in Reddit, if a question is good enough, it rises to the top, right? So I, in my normal life, would never have the opportunity to meet with Louis C.K., for example. But through something like Reddit's AMA, if Louis decides to come on and have a conversation with his fans, if I ask a good enough question, that question could be handed to him, and he would be able to answer that. And as a result, it gives me an opportunity, it gives me an in through technology that I would never likely have in the real world. So lots of opportunities in the integration of technology and arts in order to build a community. And those are just some examples. How about you?
Well, I mean, I guess both of us can talk about this, but I mean, we've talked about art all night, almost probably every episode of technology in the arts, even though it's only a 24-hour event every year. But just for background, art all night is basically a 24-hour art exhibition, basically, that's takes place in an old machine shop, right? At
Yep,
the old
it's the place where
Rolling Wire Works in Trenton,
Brooklyn
where
Wire,
the wire was made for the Brooklyn Bridge
Brooklyn Bridge. Yep,
and some other famous bridges.
yep.
So it's a bunch of volunteers get together every year, and people are asked to submit art, and it's a community thing. It's not. I mean, there are professional artists that submit art, but anyone in the community, in the area, can submit works of art, even kids, or just, as they say, refrigerator art. There's no judgment, and it's a really great time. And you have musicians. There's like 3 different stages for music, and there's also a technology aspect in the film festival, which has been added in the last couple of years. And this year they had the what was it, the silent disco or silent DJ
That's right, where
thing, where
everybody
they had the wireless headphones, the headsets that were given out, and there were DJs spinning, but nobody could hear, but the music was being transmitted wirelessly to these headphones. And so you would go into this dark room, and people were just, getting down, and you couldn't hear anything. So it was pretty funny. But that was a really cool, um, technology influenced art project there, and they have the dueling mural. I mean, that's not really technology, but you have the dueling artists with the murals outside. So I'll put a link to our the show we did with Joe Kuzemka.
Well, the technology part of it, I think, is the recording of it. The fact that everybody is taking snapshots of dueling artists, for example, and
video, and yep,
Uh,
and those murals are used. They're incorporated into artworks. The monster, is it the Monsters Ball?
Yep.
Is that what they're used for?
Yep.
So so it's in Art All Night is a product, more or less, of artworks. It's kind of its own thing, but Artworks in Trenton kind of gave birth to it, I guess, in some way, but it's kind of been handed off. And so the murals created at Art All Night are incorporated into the Artworks program. So, I guess on a related note, the art as a community service, or flipping it around, the community service. There's community art projects, interactive projects that happen all the time. I think one of our early episodes of Technology in the Arts, when we were in our really raw podcasting days, there was the building it was somewhere in Europe, Switzerland or Sweden, I can't remember, where you could call in and change the light patterns on a building using the way you you punched in numbers on your phone. And then there was a 2012, in the fall of 2012, there was a similar project where uh, you would speak into an app, a mobile app, and if you were in the vicinity of the Ben Franklin Parkway in Philadelphia, and that would whatever the sounds that you would produce would create these different light sculptures, as they called it, in the sky above the parkway. So it's something where technology is allowing for this, allowing the community to interact and also witness this art taking place, and it's just another way of exposing people to art that may not have an interest in that. Maybe it instills some interest in the arts. So it's always cool to see those interactive, technology-driven community art projects. And before I mentioned XPN's Musicians on Call program, while the basic program, the bedside performance program, doesn't really have a technology angle, that's where they have. I guess the technology end is using social media and the website to kind of create this network of local artists who will go volunteer and go to hospital rooms and visit and play for patients in Delaware Valley healthcare facilities. But a couple of parts of that Musicians on Call program have a technology aspect to them, and one of which is the CD pharmacy program. They call it a CD pharmacy. Basically, hundreds of donated new and gently used CDs are used to build CD pharmacies that they put in a dozen healthcare facilities. So it's basically gives them access to all this music, that they can enjoy at no charge, along with the CD players. So they have CD players and the CDs available to them. So instead of drugs, you're getting dispensed CDs. And the other part of the program is called Project Playback. And in that, a professional musician is paired with longtime residents at a healthcare facility for 6 to 8 weekly sessions, and they will create music with the patients. And once created, they will record the songs. They'll put them on a CD, and they hold a CD release party, and the patients and their families are there, and so the patient and the musician work together on this recording. So that's a really cool thing, I thought when I read up on that. So
I think of the two things that you've talked about so far. I'm more interested in the co-creation aspect, only because the CD pharmacy seems a bit outdated. No?
Yeah, I mean, right now you could basically have an iPod, this pharmacy, because which is outdated now, since the iPod is dead, but or at least the iPod Classic. But yeah, I mean, you could.
Well, not even that. I mean, with the streaming services that we have, couldn't it be that you could have 5 concurrent user accounts per hospital at $8 a month that have an entire incredible catalog of music that would be listenable in concurrence, right? So I have my own account, and so I would listen to that if I was sitting in a hospital room. But if I didn't have that account, wouldn't it be interesting for me to have access to a catalog of 40,000 or 100,000 or a million songs?
Yeah, but I mean, even that subscription fee might be, with the number of patients involved. I mean, if
yeah, but staying in a hospital, you would think, I don't know, that they would be able to afford $8 in a month to cover as many patients as they have for perpetuity.
Oh, I'm sure it's a legacy program, but I mean, it is nice the music is available to them.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's Pandora.
I suppose at some point it'll be brought into the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as an idea. I love the idea of music being used as therapy, but it seems like,
And
uh,
actually, I mean, they don't even need to have a subscription. I mean, XPN has a bunch of free streams on its own that they could, you
for
know.
example, but I mean, if I wanted to actually control the music that I listen to, even then, if you had a Google Plus account or a any number of accounts, Spotify account that was available to people who were present through a machine in which they did not have the username and password, but they delivered that content through a laptop. You know, if they had 10 laptops, let's say, and each of those laptops had um, an account set up that they did not know the username and password to, they would be able to listen to whatever they wanted to within reason.
Right, right. Um, I,
It's so antithetical for me. I mean, I still have CDs actually somewhere, but I have not listened to CDs in a very long time. And part of the reason for that is because comparative to Google Play Music or Pandora or Spotify, well, Google Play Music and Spotify in particular, it's so troublesome to set up any kind of a physical interface in order for me to listen to that when the other options are available to me. I can still listen to, let's say, Jimi Hendrix or um, Daft Punk or whatever I want to listen to simply by doing a search on that name and then seeing their entire catalog of music. And yes, it would cost the hospital something, but it just seems like comparative to having to go through the trouble in a situation where a patient is already probably troubled. What about the simplicity of opening up a browser and being able to visit a site and put in a name of an artist and listen?
well, I mean, I guess then you have the expense of laptops or tablets or mobile devices, whereas you can go anywhere and get a cheap CD player if the CD player breaks.
Oh,
I mean,
I'm sorry.
I think it's just the expense that's really the drawback. I mean, you have to remember, the hospital spends $5. That's like another $1,000 we get charged for an X-ray. I mean, that's the way the healthcare system is.
Well, that's
So
a bigger problem, but I
yeah.
mean, I
So
think
that's why I'm kind of leery of the hospital spending more money because I think that just messes up the healthcare industry even more. So maybe that's just the workaround. I don't know, but you, like I said, I mean, it may be upgraded at some point where it will be a streaming based. And actually, that's part of the next program they have is the Music Heal series, which is an on-demand program. It's a series of audio features that are available for on-demand listening. It's XPN morning host Michaela Majun and news director Bob Boombera, and they talk with musicians and therapists and others about the impact music has made in people's lives. So, and there's a link to it that I'll put in the show notes, and there's also resources for mental health and well-being there. So there's some on-demand stuff in that component of it, but I know what you're saying. I mean, I think it's just a
I
you
wish
know, but
everyone
I mean, the other reason why the healthcare industry is messed up because the hospitals are so behind the time. I mean, I saw a link. I didn't read the story, but I think it was on Vox.com that Americans spend more on. This is just a tweet headline, so I didn't read it, but If you want to go check it out, I think it was on Vox.com. But the headline was Americans spend more on hospital paperwork alone, just with the time it takes and 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 the money involved in it that goes with the paperwork, the financial aspect of it. Spend more on the paperwork than on like sports. So like sports tickets and sports apparel. I mean, the fact that we're still using paperwork and that hospitals still mess up the paperwork, which then leads to another round of paperwork needed and just run around. I mean, that's why the healthcare industry is such a mess. I mean, that's one component of it, but I mean, I've dealt with it. I mean, I did my coverage now through my new employer. They sent it in, they never got it. It got lost. They had to send it again, and I finally got my packet. But I've been there I've been there a month now. So,
Yeah.
I'm very distrustful of the healthcare industry, like maintaining computers and a network for streaming media to their patients. So, I mean, I was in a hospital once where I was spent with a friend of mine whose grandfather was in the hospital, and you know we heard some people come down from the floor above. They were asking for oxygen, and nobody was around to bring on, and the person died. It's like, I mean, they can't even bother to bring oxygen up one floor. I mean, how you gonna, get them to reboot a router?
Well, this is the issue with physical objects, right? If
Yeah.
you give me access to a digital object that will help my or improve my sense of being, what I don't need to go and retract a physical object that will allow me to listen to that same thing, right?
Right.
Uh, I don't know. There's so much that we can do digitally that is endless. I mean, they could set up a jukebox that was available to every patient in the library, and they might get into some trouble with the RIAA, which we've talked about,
Yeah.
in order to listen to that collection of music, but it would be no different than me sharing it with my friends.
Yeah. I mean, that might be the other issue too. I mean, that we
They,
always forget how heartless and you know uninformed the RIAA is. So I mean, be like,
well,
oh, and
regardless,
hospitals have money. Let's go sue the hospitals, which would
if,
be a wonderful idea,
let,
morons.
yeah, if we were to, for example, set up a Plex server and make friends of all of our patients, then immediately we could share movies, we could share music, we could share photos, we could share all kinds of things with a free service, right? If, for example, you and I decided that we wanted to share all of the movies and music that we had ever collected, we could do that right now legally using Plex.
Right.
And why don't we, in fact?
I don't know.
Because you don't use Plex, that's why.
I do not. Yeah.
But I have other friends who do, and their collections of movies and music are legally available to me through streaming, right? If I decide to stream from their server, it's really no different than them letting me borrow a DVD for a time. And while I am watching that, they are not able to watch that same piece of media. Is there something going on there?
I'm just keeping an eye on a spider.
Oh, spider
It was
does.
a huge one. I was down here last week. I think it was the night. Actually, I know it was after our webcast last week. I was still down here getting the links together and editing, And this, I mean, it was so big. It was crazy big.
So big.
Like
How big was it?
the legs were so like I could see like it was walking off the like I could see space between the ground and the underbelly of the spider, and it was across the room. Like it had the legs were so long and so strong that it could lift itself off the floor, and it was scurrying at a rapid pace. So this one's kind of just like hanging out in its web in the corner, which I didn't notice until after we started. So
I definitely knew something was distracting you.
yeah, so.
All right.
There was one other thing I would talk. It wasn't really a technology thing, but XPN also partners with the Mural Arts program starting in 2004, and they they basically like hooked up with different groups, and uh, they did a mural series based on that was influenced by the sounds of Philadelphia. So there was like a connection between actual like visual arts and music, and these murals are still around. I think the last one was done in 2009, but they're still floating around Philadelphia, or at least on sides of buildings you can still see them. So another community arts program. But I mean, is there anything else you'd like to talk about tonight?
Um, I don't know. I'm interested about this idea of holding on to the old method in order to meet a new need. And so, while I'm excited about the idea, I think that work can be done. I say this because this is the work that I do, right? If
Yeah,
somebody comes
I
to me,
understand. I understand that. I totally understand it. And I agree that there are
I'll,
better ways to approach it now.
I'll give you an example.
I just don't know if hospitals are.
It doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example, though. I recently sat down with a client who I ended up not working with um, because she wanted some design done for web design and graphic design done for an album launch. And the album launch was music that she had created and recorded, and she was very excited about, and I was excited about too for her. Um, but the way that we started the conversation was that she had decided to spend half of her budget on pressing the CDs. And I said, why? And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, most people don't buy their music through physical media anymore. Why are you spending all that money on physical media when you could probably make more money and we could benefit more if you were just streaming, or if you were using iTunes Music Store, or Google Play Music, or whatever it is that you wanted to do, Amazon Music.
I mean, it's
Uh,
my understanding is that CD Baby basically gives you all those options. You get. I think there's the download aspect, and I think if you can buy a physical CD, you
right,
just have to keep sending them more as they run out of stock.
but this was
And then they also, I think there's also a TuneCast option which allows it to go to Amazon and iTunes
let me
Store.
ask
And
you a question, honestly, because maybe I'm naive. When was the last time you bought a CD?
I mean, the only time I buy a CD is when I'm at Princeton Record Exchange.
And when was the last time you were at Princeton Record Exchange? Which, by the way,
Mm,
is there not as a CD store per se, but really as a vinyl store.
yes, I know, but my stuff isn't really usually on vinyl. So I'm trying to find these.
Your stuff is usually on iTunes. Your stuff is
No,
usually
no, no. There's a lot of stuff that I love from the '80s that's out of print. That's not available on iTunes. A lot.
that's odd to me.
I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, at one point I had a list.
There is a producer and a music company out there who is making content only available through CD and not through streaming or licensed electronic delivery methods?
Well, no. I mean, the music's not available in any format. It's not available on CD or on iTunes or Amazon. It's just not there. It's just
What is the
out of
most
print.
likely? What is the most likely streaming, or what is the most likely delivery method that they would choose if they were going to choose to reissue that content?
Oh, it would be digital.
Yeah. Well, this woman was making a brand new album, and she was trying to convince me that CDs were the way to go because she was going to be at shows and she wanted to be able to hand something out to people.
And that's all well and good, but you're basically going to be, you're lucky if you get rid of 10 of those at a show.
Not only that, but she could have used a USB key, or she could have used a URL, a special URL.
Or you could have just had buzz cards done with like a download code.
Exactly right. Either way, any method would have been better than a CD because a CD adds the additional cost of at least $1 for the media, probably $1 for the printing, and probably
Keep talking.
$1 for what?
I'll be right back. Keep talking.
Probably $1 for the delivery of the media. So if you have a case, you're going to be paying for that. If you have printing, you're going to be paying for that. There's a certain beauty to the album art, but as I look at my screen here, my screen is going to show a far more beautiful rendering of any art that you come up with comparative to a CD cover or even an album cover. I can full screen album art on my screen. I cannot full screen album art on a piece of paper. A piece of paper is limited to the resolution that it's limited to.
That is correct. By the way, so that was a giant cricket.
You know, crickets are good.
I know, but not in my basement.
No, they're perfectly fine in your basement. They're getting rid of pests. They're living their lives. They're just trying to make your life better, really, Brian.
Not in my basement.
Okay. So,
In my basement, they are a pest.
my point being that,
They can take care of all that nature stuff outside.
yeah, we're in their way. They are not in our way.
Oh boy, yeah, okay.
Okay. As long as we have the philosophical portion of the show.
Yes.
My point being, though, that I felt like this woman was foolish because she decided to pursue a CD distribution method when it was costing me, as a designer and a marketer and a brand management person, because she didn't have any money left over because she had to deliver these CDs. And I said, my time is valuable. The CDs are not nearly as valuable. You can do all that for free. The distribution is part of your internet costs. And so I felt like that was a misstep on her part. And when I could not convince her, we had to part ways.
Yeah, I mean, so you said delivery of the CD. Where was she delivering them to?
Well, to her shows or possibly to some.
So she was just bringing them with. I mean, like I said, I mean, I know like with CD Baby, when they run out of stock, you just send them more CDs, whatever. But
You're going to CD Baby as though that is what she was using for distribution. She was going through some guy who was doing the printing, doing the CD duplication, doing the, blah, blah, blah. And so he probably had a machine that he had to pay for, and she was paying for that machine. But my point is, why are CDs even in distribution anymore? I mean, Apple left it a long time ago, and I don't really see the point of it if I want music, I don't go to a CD store. I don't go to Barnes and Noble.
All
I
right.
don't go to. They just closed. I don't even know what the name of it was, but you don't go to a mall and really find a CD store anymore.
Yep. Yep. You're right. No,
There are
I agree. I mean,
uh,
I don't see the need for physical CDs. I mean, unless you're into vinyl. I mean,
physical media. For vinyl media, that is different, and that is a specialty. And probably CDs will return to that specialty niche, but we are not there. We're post CD and pre CD nostalgia.
retro.
Right.
Yeah.
When CDs are retro, then all of a sudden
Retro hip.
stores will pop up that are distributing CDs as uniquity items. But right now, all of the recording agents who are trying to make money on their back order and back stock of CDs are stuck. And so they still offer these things through Walmart and Target and whatever. You can go into those stores and you can see those sections. But in fact, I don't even think there is a CD section in Target anymore.
I, I think there is. Oh, actually, that was a uh, again mentioning 99% Invisible, which I haven't talked about yet. This is the first reference, but there was actually a cool episode not too long ago where they talked about it was an REM CD. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but back when CDs came packaged in the long box.
Yeah.
Remember the long box?
Yep.
And the record industry, in one of many missteps they've taken over the years, was like all on board with these long boxes because they could fit, in the same space. Basically, you can put two CDs in the space of one album, and you could still fit them in the spaces in the old record stores that we just said were obsolete now. But back then, they were like, "Oh, this is going to save the music industry." The
There's a
long box, the packaging, the
there
simple packaging was going to save the industry. That's what the record industry really thought. There was an op-ed printed about this, about how the long box was like this miracle thing.
there are needs for record stores, but they are not the same needs as ascribed to by the record industry. That they are a retro, uniquity, nostalgia industry. It is a valid industry, but it's not. You can't have 10 of them on a city block. It's not like a Starbucks.
Oh, well, here's the thing that was interesting about it. So they had, and this almost ties back into our community service thing, because so it kind of like wraps this up. Our whole CD, not CD, whatever, that conversation goes back to our original topic here. Basically, and I'm not going to get the details right, so I'll link to the 99% Invisible episode, which is a fantastic podcast, by the way.
I agree.
Much better than this one.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so REM, and I can't remember which album it was, which CD it was, basically said to the record label, we're not putting our next album out if you're going to put it in this long box. We're not doing it. It's ridiculous. It's an environmental disaster. And so the record label and their management, they were trying to figure out what are they going to do. How are they going to, make REM happy and get the CD out and still keep it in the long box, even though behind the scenes they were trying to figure out how to get rid of the long box because they figured this was going to start being a problem. So they, at the same time, somebody approached the record industry guy who was trying to figure out this whole REM issue about the motor voter bill, where you would register your motor vehicle, and you could register to vote at the same time. And it kept on getting knocked down, knocked down. It would always get killed, on its way to passage. And finally, the record industry guy said, "How about we connect these two issues?" So he said, "We're going to put." That was like the whole Rock the Vote thing. How Rock the Vote started. They put the like a petition letter on the back of, or as part of the long box, the packaging for REM's CD, and that would they would use that to, engage music listeners and, write to their representatives and get the motor voter bill passed. And they went to REM, and REM's like, "We love the idea, let's do it." So now they had REM on board. They could put out their album, and they used it to, have these petitions sent, and it became they got so many responses to Congress, so many of these letters, these petitions, and everything just snowballed, and eventually the motor voter bill passed, and that CD has a lot to do with it, and I can't remember which one it was. I wish I could, but so I'll link to the 99% Invisible episode about it. But because of this CD, that led to all these young people now being able to register to vote when they went to the DMV. So that is the community service aspect.
Very, very nice. Nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you, Roman Mars, in 99% Invisible. I have to get caught up. I think I missed like 3 or 4 It's a Thing podcasts too that I haven't gotten caught up on.
I think I caught all of them, but I'm looking forward to the next season. I hope they continue it.
Yeah. So. All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, that concludes this episode of Technology in the Arts. Thank you for joining us. Next Monday night, we'll be back to talk about technology as a creative influence, how the need for features and creative applications influence community development, as well as how technology can directly inspire creation of artistic works. In the meantime, you can stay up to date on the latest happening with the show by visiting technologyinthearts.com, liking our Facebook page, visiting us on Google+, following us on Twitter at tech_arts. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and search for us via your favorite podcatcher. We suggest iTunes, Pocket Casts, or Stitcher. And always remember to go to LeMasney.com for your personal or organizational technology and design needs. Was that good enough for you?
Very good.
Okay. Until next time, for Technology in the Arts, this is Brian Kelley.
And this is John LeMasney. Take care.